And welcome to our PatternFly demo. We'll go ahead and jump right in this morning. If you're watching a little bit later, I'll post this on YouTube. All right, so to kick us off, we're going to start with interaction design, Matt Carano. I'm sure Matt will join us a little bit later on. So let's skip down to visuals. And Mary, if you'll kick us off with notification drawer and date and time picker.
Sure. All right, let me share real quick. Okay, so I'll start with notification drawer because that one's a little bit more finished. As far as I know, it is finished from the visual standpoint. So we looked at this kind of from two perspectives, one with a simple notification drawer and another one with a more complex notification drawer. So this is an example of a simple drawer. So a pretty common visualization for an unread notification is to have a little dot, usually a blue one, at the top of the masthead. So that's what we're going with. So it's something that the user's seen before in other UIs. Then we're kind of repeating that dot in everywhere that we're, again, indicating unread to make that kind of a teachable moment. So we put it here where we mark the number of unread, then put the blue dot next to where all the other unread ones are. And we also change the background color when it's read versus unread. So red is, if it's a red message, not red as in the color, red as in if you've looked at it. It's white as opposed to our lightest gray color for an unread message. So other kind of things that this component does, if you click the kebab, you get a few different options of things that you would click. So then this is the complex notification drawer. So this one, in a sense, complex just means that it's grouped notifications. So rather than just everything stacked up at once, we do have the capability now to group the notifications by similarity. So it's a similar visualization, but they all, regardless of read or unread, have the same background color for the group label, and it isn't until you expand one of them that you see what the difference is. So it marks in a blue badge if that group contains anything that's unread, and then it's a gray badge if there's nothing that's unread. So if we were to expand one out, it's essentially what we saw in the simple notification. So then just a spec. Then I mocked it up in just a couple different scenarios too, like what it would look like on scroll. So I think that's it for notification drawer. As far as date and time picker, I'm going to share Sketch because I'm actually working on it right now. And I think it'd be a little bit more up to date that way. Okay, so this has been kind of a little bit of a project because there's a lot of different interactions that we want to consider. So I'll kind of just breeze through this because there's a lot to show. But I essentially took a look at how we could look at a single date without a time picker, a single date with a time picker range, and all the different interactions that go along with that. And I marked how many clicks it would take to actually finish the task because I think that that's important to think about. So I've been trying to keep that in mind when I'm designing these. Single date picker with a single time picker as opposed to a time range, and the whole flow that a user would go through to complete that. And then, sorry if this is giving anyone a head rush running through here. So then a date range without a time picker, a date range with a time picker, and then I also looked at a couple other more kind of add-on features that depending on the situation could be considered. This is all still kind of up in the air. I was just trying to think of other possible things that in our more standard views that I just showed, what could be left out and what might be useful, like being able to switch from a 24-hour clock to a 12-hour clock, having toggles to quickly switch between today, yesterday, and tomorrow, And maybe for a situation where you're trying to pick a time and no calendar is needed, so just a time picker. So this is all still heavily a work in progress. So if anyone has any thoughts or has seen examples of date and time pickers that they think look really great, I'd love some ideas because I'm definitely at a little bit of a standstill with this. So I think that's all for me.
Okay, great. And any questions for Mary? All right. With interaction design, Matt Carano is going to go over many design docs he has here, alerts and notifications, links and tables, and we'll be covering several different things we've been working on.
Hi. I'm not going to go through each of these documents because there are quite a number of them. There are I linked to the to where they live in the GitHub, and these are also all should now be exposed on the website demo. So I know Joachim's going to show that a little bit later. So you should also be able to get to these design guidelines from there if you want to take a look at them. I'll just go through quickly and just kind of summarize what's covered in each document. As you can see, this is the collective work between myself, Stacy, Josh, and Bree. And we also have other folks that are helping out working on more design guidelines that will be released in the near future. So alerts and notifications covers the use of alerts either for inline notifications or toast notifications. Buttons and links covers usage of buttons, what button placement and different button styles, when to use them, when to use buttons versus links.
Matt, are you sharing your desktop?
I'm sorry?
Do you need to share your desktop?
I wasn't going to go through all these documents unless folks want me to, for interest of time. I'm just kind of summarizing what's in the documents.
Okay.
Forms covers topics related to forms, labeling, placement of labels, placement of help on forms, syntax hints, and any forms layout topics. Links and tables covers both. I'm sorry, that should be lists and tables, not links and tables. Let me correct that. Lists and tables covers both the usage of the data list and the data table components. So it talks about when to use a list, when to use a table, and the different variations that we support for lists and tables. Navigation, written by Stacy, covers the use of different navigation patterns we have in PatternFly 4. We have both a horizontal navigation for very simple navigations. Vertical navigation can support up to 2 levels of navigation, and a tertiary navigation, and also context selector is covered in that document. Toolbar covers the various configurations of a toolbar, which can be used on top of any of a list or table view. And then finally, login covers usage of the standard login screen and also covers some of the login variants, social login, social logins, single sign-on, and multi-factor login. So a bunch of content there. Feel free to browse it. Does anybody have any questions at this point or want me to drill in deeper on any of these topics? Okay, if not, then I'm going to hand it back to Rachel to continue with the demo.
Thanks so much, Matt. And back to visuals. Michael Solidonia is going to share a card system.
Yep. Thanks, Rachel. Okay, so I worked on this system for how cards work, essentially. Collaborated on this with Michael Coker quite a bit. So I think we did a really good job in coming up with something that works really well for both design and implementation. It's pretty clean, so I'll go ahead and explain it. Essentially, each card has, or can have, 3 sections. It's essentially comprised of a header, a body, and a footer, which I've outlined here in these different colors. And it can have any number of these, or any combination of these, but it always goes in that same order. So header is always on top, body, and then footer is always on bottom. The only thing really to note here is that the body can contain any CSS layout, so it's pretty flexible to meet a variety of whatever kind of content you want to have in there. And you can also have multiple body elements, which I'll get into towards the end. First, I'll show you kind of the kind of use case you have with that. The spacing is pretty simple. Essentially, you can think of it per section, and also as the whole card. For the whole card, there's always 24 pixels around the edges of the top, bottom, left, and right of the card. But the spacing per section, the left and right are always 24, but the top and bottom depend on what section or what combination of sections you're using, and it's a lot more simple than that. Basically, anything that comes after the header, has a 16 pixel spacer on top. So here, if we scroll down, you can see we've got just a header and a body. That body's got 16 pixels on top. The header's got 0 on bottom. And then here you can see there's no body, but the footer inherits that 16 pixels because it comes after the header. And then the reason why we don't split that spacing up between the header and the body, or the body and the footer, is just general, I guess, kind of a cleanliness thing. It's just simpler that way, both for design and development. And it also gives us a nicer, what I felt was a nicer spacing layout-wise. So again, here you can see I'm just kind of going through the different combinations that you might run into, just exhausting all of them. But a body with no header, but with a footer. And if you've got anything coming after the body, again, that body's got the 24. Only time we're worrying about 16 is when anything comes after the header. If you, for whatever reason, got a body with no header or footer, because that is the whole card, it's got 24 around the whole thing. So again, there's always 24 pixels around the whole thing. And then per section, if you come after the header, you've got 16 on top. Yep, okay. And so going back to what I was saying about having multiple body elements, it might look something like this. Again, because that first body comes after the header, it's got 16, but then the body after that, again, it's just got the 24. And this is because the header typically has a header, I guess, a title, you might call it. It can have that, or a toolbar, or both, and you really just don't need 24 pixels of spacing between that and the actual body content itself. So going into an example of where you might have multiple body elements, it might look something like this. Again, this is the exact same spacing you see on the left, just without the spacers and with actual real content. And each body element is using a split layout view here, where we've got some data on the left and then a chart on the right. And then again, just another high fidelity example of just throwing in, we've got a header here with just a body, and again, a similar layout of the chart on the left and then the key on the right. And that's pretty much it. The whole idea is that you can pretty much just drop your content in, and whatever layout works best for your content you'd use, and it just works, and it looks nice, and it all lines up as well when you're in something like a dashboard. So yeah, if you have any other questions about it, feel free to reach out. happy to help explain this a little bit further. That's it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Michael. Any questions for the time being? All right, we'll move along to CSS, and Christy's going to present data table demo and data list demo.
Hi guys. So I've been working on the data list and data table demo examples, and basically just making updates to both of the actual components based on issues that have come up. And so for each of these demos, there are about 5 variations based on the different variations we have in core. But I'm just going to show one for each of the list and tables today. So this is a list, and then this is a table. So as you can see, they're pretty similar, but Matt Carano's documents kind of documents which one you should use over the other and how they vary for different use cases. So this is the data list example, and it's important to note there's like no extra styling in this at all. So that's a testament to all of the hard design and development work. And this is just a typical sidebar, and then the page header, and then this white area is a main section, and then underneath is another page main section. This one just has a white background, but they have the same padding. And this is a card. So it's really easy to just stack components on top of each other in the card. So this is a toolbar, obviously, and then this is the data list. And then pagination just sits on the bottom of that. And for each of the data list rows, they're broken up into data list cells. So this is a cell on the left, and this is a cell on the right. The right one just has alignment to the right. And then because this is an expandable variation, we put a compact table in the expandable row. And so when this breaks, you can see these columns get shorter. And then another thing to note is that tables should have they have modifiers to determine when they break. And so if you have a table with a lot of columns, if you don't have a large enough breakpoint, these columns will run off the table. So that's another important note. And then when I break this down, the columns stack on top of each other, and then this is an expandable table. And then on mobile, this is a change. So both mobile and for the data list and the data table look the same. And basically the main section loses its padding, and then the spaces between rows grow from 1 pixel to 8 pixels. So it's really nice. It breaks down the rows so they're easier to view on mobile. So it looks like that. And then for the data table, compound expansion variation, it acts exactly the same when you break it down. So it looks like this. And you can also see the work that Michael Coker did with the toolbar, and how when it breaks down, some of these items are hidden from the screen. And then go like that. So yeah, feel free to check it out. And it hasn't been fully reviewed yet, so it'd be great to get some feedback on these. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Christy. Any questions?
I just wanted to say this looks great, and it's really great to see all these pieces finally put together into a full page view. It really starts to illuminate what PatternFly 4 is.
Well said. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And next, Michael Coker is going to go over our focus indicator in Firefox, progressive wizards, and viewport units.
Hey, excuse me. Okay, so let's see. The first one was Firefox button focus indicator. Yeah, that's going to be a really hard one to show over BlueJeans, so I'll just talk about it. Basically, the focus state indicator. So if you have a focus state on an element, or you tab to an element, that indicator in Firefox was a little unpredictable. Didn't always work like we had expected. So we just refactored that a bit. So you should see a change there. If you go go to, say, the button component and tab through those buttons, you should see a noticeable difference and improvement there. The progressive wizard, so this is a work in progress, but pretty much there. I think I have it here somewhere. Aha, yeah. This is basically it, kind of like a modal box currently that has the same dimensions as some of the other elements in the system or components in the system. Responsive states, modifiers for a couple of different types of layouts. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple. So that should be in the system pretty soon. And this is the Viewport Units edition in our sizing utility class. Here it is. So if you use any of our utility classes, you'll notice that the sizing utility used to handle width and height. And I think it was a 0, 25, 50, 75, 100. We added viewport units to that. And so you can do 50 VH or 50 VW. We also added the 33% and 66% widths and heights to the sizing utilities. So you can do 33 VW if you want, and 66 VH, for example, too. And that's it.
Thanks, Michael. Any questions? All right, Matt Carlton's going to go over skip to content.
Hey guys, this will be real quick. I did implement the skip to content component, which you can see, but I also have it implemented in the page demo too, just because it actually makes more sense to see it here. So for those of you unfamiliar, skip to content, it's basically just allows screen reader users or keyboard users to tab, and when they tab through the page here, the first thing they're going to see up in the top left here is the skip to content link, which they can hit, and then they're going to actually go straight through to the main content of the page. So it allows them to avoid having to tab through all the navigation items in the page. This is an open PR, so this is actually just, as you can see, just using one of our primary buttons. The design of this could totally change if design has any opinion on that, but this is more just implementing it for the sake of it. So now if we want to make visual changes to that, we definitely could do that. So if anybody has any feedback on that, that'd be great. And that's it.
All right, thank you, Matt. And moving on to React, we have Zach with Faster CI.
So pull request kind of sums it up. So before, whenever you would make a pull request to the PatternFly React repo, we would have Travis go through a 28-minute build process. So I managed to cut that down to about half the time, and I did it by splitting it up between Travis and Circle. So the essential stuff that runs the tests, Travis does now, or continues to do, and then Circle does the building the surge link for your test. So, I mean, I can just go ahead and show it. So this is the old. We would have kind of this long shell script run for you, and it would take, I think, around 20 to 30 minutes, somewhere in there. And now, let's see. The same thing for a deploy. We'll still do all those steps, but it'll do some of them in parallel. It'll kind of split it up like this, and it still takes a long time, but at least now you can see it individually, and we run the things in parallel that we can. And for the pull requests, this is what's important. It's much shorter. So yeah, that should hopefully help speed up some development.
Thanks so much, Zach. And any questions for Zach on his work so far? All right. Moving on to Ian with template string utility.
Hey guys, so really quick, I wanted to show, we were searching for a way to be able to embed expressions within a string on the PatternFly React project. And it's currently in production on the chip group component. So if the end user wanted to change the actual location of the expression within the collapsed text, you can see there's an actual example here within the prop definition showing the user how to use the remaining variable within the string. So if they wanted to change the string to like 5 or 1 left, they could just change or add text before the remaining variable or anything like that. That the user can now use this utility function that's in the utils.ts file within the helpers directory for any developers that want to use this particular function. If you wanted to look into how it's implemented, the chip group component's a good place to look for that. And yeah, that's all for me.
Great, thanks, Ian. We're going to move on to our PF4 website work. Joachim is going to go over our site progress.
Yeah, just a second. Okay. All right, so for our website, the first thing is there's now the sidebar toggle over here. So it's being displayed on the pages that are, where it's applicable. So you'll see it for, for these 3 main pages: Get Started, Design Guidance, and Documentation. And it's also mobile friendly. So, if you were to have a smaller view, it would not show the sidebar nav to begin with. That's an improvement that I made to the React library, and that's being also pulled into the website. But you can still open the nav here if you want to. And then for the content, there's been many updates done by Matt and Stacy. For the design guidelines, we have now a ton of usage and behavior pages that Matt talked about earlier. And then for the styles pages, the typography page was there last sprint, but some updates were made to it and some fixes, and I should actually see the proper previews for the various font sizes that we have, along with line height images, some spacing. And by the way, these 2 new pages, the icons page and the typography page, instead of using regular Markdown syntax, well, it is using Markdown syntax, but it's in the MDX file format so that we can combine Markdown syntax with JSX capabilities. So a lot of these other pages are just regular Markdown files to make it easier for contributors to add content. And then for some of the richer pages that we have, for example, icons and typography, we can actually combine Markdown with JSX, so that it allows us to create richer pages. So this is the typography page. And then a new page that we added was the icons page. So this shows the icons that are common between Core and React. So you get nice previews of all the applicable available icons. You can also search them. So if I type in add, you can see that it filters down to, in this case, add circle and degraded because it contains the word add inside of it. And then also when you click on a tile, it gives you also some added functionality. It allows you to copy the import statement using the React, the React way of doing it. But you can also copy the I tag HTML icon to paste that into your web app. I think these buttons right now are broken. I'm going to fix them shortly after the demo. But then one brand new functionality is that you can also download these SVG files. So if you hit that, it's going to download that SVG in the SVG format. And then for the documentation, the CSS Variables page got a little bit of a refresh. So we've had that before in the workspace, but now it's using our table component. And again, you can search was included, so you can search across all 3 columns in this case because we are in the React side of things. So got React tokens, variables, and value. But you could, for example, search for color if you wanted to, and it would show you all of the applicable rows. Similar thing for core. You've also got the CSS variables there, but it, without the React tokens column because it doesn't make sense in that context. And this page is undergoing a couple more changes, so there should be another column popping up soon that shows you a kind of a translation map for some of these colors that actually derive their value from a different global variable. And then also for the documentation side, now when you switch to either React or Core, you should also see the version numbers that are being pulled in. So right now this is being built up using React Core 2.18, React Charts, and React Table. And for Core, you can also get that version information there. Other than that, just updated to the latest dependencies for both Core and React, and also updated all the dependencies that Gatsby uses. That's it. Any questions?
Thanks so much, Jakob. And yeah, we're still working on refining the site, and we'll be using the site very shortly for designer training as we internally help folks get familiar with PatternFly 4. So be on the lookout for that. And Sarah's going to speak a little bit about website wireframe perception after doing some user interviewing back in September 2018. So this was based off of some previous wireframes. And we used the findings in that study to refine our current design.
Hi, good. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. So yes, as Rachel said, some of these tests that we have done is I think it's old, and based on what I see, the wireframe and the website has changed a lot since then. But I guess some of the feedback we got is going to be still relevant, and I thought it would be nice just to talk about it in brief. We got lots of findings, but I'm just going to give you a high-level summary of how we did it and what we did, and maybe just like a few of the findings. Go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So yes, it was back in August, September, we did a series of testings with Rachel and Stacy. We actually used a mixed method approach where we interviewed people like on one-on-one interviews, and that was during the DevConf Boston meetup. And we did interviews, we did some...
Hey, Sarah, we can't see anything.
Oh.
Now we do. Yeah, it's loading now.
Is it coming up?
Yeah, I see something now.
Okay, cool. So do you see my presentation, sort of, the presentation page?
It's PDF website wireframe test PDF.
No.
Is what we see.
Okay.
And now we see a slide deck.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Okay.
So yes, basically, as I was saying, it was just a series of studies. One of them was just interviewing with people. The other one was wireframe walkthrough. Basically, we showed them the wireframes and we walked them through the slides and the pages that we had, and just to understand the impression and perception of the content. And the other test we did was sort of a first click test. Basically, we showed them the home page, and there were a couple of scenarios that they had to choose where they would click if they were in that scenario. Like the very high level finding was that on the home page, they had some problem with understanding what PatternFly is about. There's a small blurb about like what PatternFly is, but it wasn't really clear to the users. And how they can use PatternFly was the other issues. And they couldn't find the links to the main contents right away. That's something that most of them mentioned. So we thought maybe a creative demo, a very short, like maybe, I don't know, a tiny little demo or animation of what people can do with PatternFly is going to be a nice thing on the homepage. Some improvement areas was the findings showed terminology we have some problem with terminology, we have to work on it, and the structure of some of the content. Again, some of these will have already changed, so that's good to see the improvement. So in total, we talked to about 32 participants. 12 of them were just interviews, and 10 of them were doing like sort of moderated walkthrough, and then we got some 23 responses from the optimal workshop, which is a click test that I told you about. Let me walk you through the wireframe that we had and some of the high-level findings from there. I'm gonna switch to the PDF. Do you guys see the PDF now? Yep.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So this was the home page of that wireframe at the time. Again, things have changed, but very interesting finding at the time was that, so once they come to this page, they first figured out this is a website about PatternFly 4, because that's the first thing you would see up here. But honestly, this is a PatternFly website, and we had to work on that. So changing that part is going to help so much when understanding what's the goal of this website, just making sure this is not about the version of PatternFly, it's just about PatternFly. We had 2 links for getting started for developers and designers. This was a bit confusing for them because we got really interesting feedback from developers at the DevConf. They said, well, so once you click on this, like if you're a developer, you will see development documentation, and if you're a designer, you would see some design documentation at a time. But the developers told us, like, okay, I'm a developer, I'm comfortable with developing, but what I want to know if I'm coming to PatternFly, I want to know how to design stuff, because that's the part I don't know how to do. So basically, I think separating the website based on persona wouldn't be that's a great idea. Maybe consolidating these 2 would work, or change the wording. Like don't say, don't separate based on persona, but just use action words. Say develop with PatternFly or design with PatternFly, and they would decide whether or not they are a developer or designer and what they want to do with the website. And the other part that we got, this feedback, was about why PatternFly 4. It's nice to have things for the very first time user. So if they come for the first time, they just want to know why PatternFly. But that's the only scenario that would be interested to know why PatternFly, because it sounds more of a marketing. So basically, if you are like a, say, returning user, you don't want to look at why PatternFly all the time, like like on the top of the page. So basically, this is the least useful type of information for both new users and maybe returning users. So maybe we can, I don't know, move this part to somewhere to the bottom of the page. The most important or most informative part of the page for the users were Meet PatternFly, where they could actually understand what exactly PatternFly can do for them and the links to the contents. So I think we need to make this part more prominent than this part, because this is the main part they can get information about PatternFly and how to use it and where to go. The Meet, the word, the terminology was kind of confusing. Again, Meet PatternFly sounds like meeting the team, but not the content. So maybe we need to do some work around that terminology as well. Quick links, although it says quick links, but it's down toward the end of the page, so it's not really quick links. So maybe we can just consolidate what we have here with Meet PatternFly content and make it more accessible and quick to use, actually. So that was some feedback we got from homepage. So we tested 2 versions of Wireframe at a time. The first version, this would say, like the second version would say community instead of contribute. And we found contribute to be more useful and like more clear to the participants, because community, they don't know what's community of user, community of developer, community of designer. What do we mean by community? Contribute was a better terminology in that scenario. And then we showed them documentation page again at a time. This has changed, I think. But there were some confusion about the terminologies we used for the categories at a time. Instead of styles, we used to have foundation, but foundations was kind of really confusing because apparently it was a CSS framework and people were confused with that. For developer docs, we had developer APIs. Again, very confusing. We changed it to developer docs is better, but still not that clear to them. utility is also really confusing to the users. They don't exactly know what it is. So we show them the page for the components. This is the component page again at a time. One thing they mentioned was that this part is taking so much of a space and is not giving you so much information. So maybe we can work around the padding and the spacing around that area and just make it a little bit more smaller so that they see the main content much easier in a quicker way. One thing they all mentioned is that they really want to see example and the code at the same time, and this is the redesign of the first wireframe. So they want to see the code and the design at the same time. And one thing they said, they want to see the live presentation of the code. So as soon as they change the code, they want to see the live demo of the code right away. And that's something that most of the people actually mentioned. A live demo of the codes that they change here is gonna help them so much with figuring out how to use it and when to use it. These tabs that you see up here, HTML and React, we don't see that down here. So as soon as you scroll down, you won't be able to switch between these two tabs. So it would be nice to repeat those tabs again for each of those examples. And in previous wireframe, this documentation, the link that you see here, they look like a bottom. It was kind of confusing. We switched them to links, and now it's working just fine. Much better than bottoms, actually. And the last page, I guess, no, the third page we looked at was this developer documentation. Again, this was kind of confusing page. The content they saw under the developer documentation wasn't something they expected, especially when it comes to HTML documentation. So as soon as they see developer documentation, they thought this is a really technical information. And if you're a designer, you won't need that information. But when they clicked into that page and they saw HTML documentation, they said, well, that's something we need. So basically, the content wasn't reflecting what they saw as the name of the category. And they said they really want to see that HTML documentation on that, on this page, on the example page. So some way to consolidate that content is going to be really helpful for them. And the other confusing thing about that page was that the focus is on HTML documentation, but we are showing them a list of components. So it's kind of confusing to figure out what's happening. Again, I'm sure this has changed. And then about the design documentation or design guideline page, this has changed, I guess. But again, one thing that actually was prominent among feedbacks was that they want to see the most important thing first, like what to do and what not to do, like the best practices right in front of them on the top of the page. So maybe switching the order of the contents would help so much. Instead of showing the examples or elements or things like that, maybe just show them what's most important to you when you're designing a model or something like that. So again, that was the most important feedback. Again, we got lots of details for each of these findings, but I'm going to stop at this point and see if you have any questions. We can delve into more details if you need, and we can actually have another meeting for that to talk about research specifically. But anyways, do you have any question for me at this point?
I just have a comment. I think, Sarah, this was a great report, and it's really great to see the detail here. I think, as you mentioned, the problem is that the design has changed so much since you did this research. What I think would be useful to do, and maybe we could do this with, the team that's working on the website specifically, is almost go through this report and kind of compare with what we have now. So I think some of these findings are definitely relevant to what we're doing now, even if the screens have changed somewhat. Some of them may not be, but kind of to look at what can we learn from this relative to what we have now without necessarily having to repeat all this testing with the current website. And try to,
yeah, I agree totally. Yes, we should do that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it from me.
Great, thank you, Sarah. And Gina's going to share Spacer's page for the website.
Hi, I'm going to share my screen and just show what I came up with. So for the spacers page, we just go over the definition and how to use them correctly. And this is what it came out with, and I worked with Stacy on this as well. But I put the Envision project link in the demo if anybody has any comments or suggestions or feedback. You're welcome to comment on it. That's all I have.
Okay, any questions for our team today? All right, I'll see you in 2 weeks' time for our next demo at 11 a.m. EST. Thanks everyone for joining, and have a great day.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks, guys.